especially if you're like a young mom or someone who's extremely busy, like you don't have time for that. You don't have the emotional like capacity to take on all of that and try and figure out for yourself what's the facts. And so, and I said that a lot more in the beginning when we were starting out. It's like, this is like a jumping off point for our listener. Like now you have like the basics and you can dive into the stories that you are curious about and want to know more on, and you can do your own research. But now you kind of have a bird's eye view of each issue.
My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Welcome to the Good Space Podcast, and today we are speaking to someone really special, Annie Bowles, who is the founder of Sugarfree Media and host of the News du Jour podcast. Fun fact, she goes by her nickname Annie, but Antigone is her full name. So cool. She graduated from American University in Washington, D.C. after interning in both the Senate and the House of Representatives on Capitol Hill. Coming home to the heartland, she grappled with the need to pull women into the political landscape, as well as the lack of reliable news and news geared towards young women. She made it her mission to help fill those needs and never looked back. Annie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you because I don't know exactly how we met each other at first, but when I saw what you were doing with Sugarfree Media, it resonated so much with what I'm trying to do on the Good Space, just in a spiritual aspect. And so I'm excited to talk to you about, well, first, the name has such a deeper meaning than just on the surface, which I'm so excited to talk about. But I guess, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you decided to do what you're doing?
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for having me on. Sugarfree Media was born out of like a bunch of random things. Like I'd had the idea, I was actually in a long distance relationship my last year of college. And this is really where the idea was born, because I would go to the newsstand at the airport to grab like a quick magazine. But I found myself wanting to buy like 10 because I was like, I care about health. And I also care about like celebrity gossip. I want to know that. But I also need like a newspaper because I need to know about the news. And I was realizing Esquire and GQ and men's magazines cover all of these things because they understand men want to know about all of those things. And so that's where the idea really came from, is like, I wanted to create like a print magazine that would cover all of those topics that are relevant to the modern woman and what she cares about, and respect the fact that she wants to stay informed. And then life happened. I graduated. I started big girl jobs, quote unquote, but really like I kept the idea alive, always wanted to do it, but needed a little push. And life eventually gave me that push when I developed a stomach condition that I really couldn't be at an office, like sitting up at a desk all day. I needed to be able to take breaks as needed. And it was conflicting a lot with work. And I ended up moving up to Oklahoma, where I'm actually from, but to move in with my boyfriend at the time, my now husband. I decided, you know what, I'll just start this as like a personal blog. And if it makes sense as a concept, if women are drawn to it and it works, I'll run with it. And that's basically what happened. It started as a personal blog, and it was actually at that point called See by Antigone. And then it blossomed into what it is today. And like you said, Sugarfree Media really stands for not sugarcoating anything and just like being your real self and getting down to like the authentic and sort of just like cutting out the BS and getting to the point. I definitely think anyone who knows me knows that that's what I'm about. And that's kind of how I do things. So I don't like to beat around the bush. And that's where the name came from.
I love it. And it's perfect because I actually pulled this little quote from your website. So if you're listening, hopefully it'll help clarify as well, or not clarify, but add on to. So it says, we seek to help women who are taught to always be polite know that it's okay to not agree with everyone. It's okay to use an active voice. It's okay to not sugarcoat things to make them more palatable for the receiver. Love how you worded that, because we've talked about this before. I don't like small talk. I just don't like it. I like to just get to the meat of things, be clear, be honest. And And sometimes like I know that I would be told, oh, that's too aggressive or that's too like harsh or too mean. And so how did you get to that point as a woman where you're like, I don't have to agree with you and I'm okay with that. I don't have to sugarcoat to hedge or to make you feel more comfortable. Like, what did it take to get there?
I think it's a lot of different components, but I think I could feel myself doing it a lot. And definitely, I talk about this a lot as well, but when I went to school in DC, I was in classrooms with a lot of like know-it-alls and egos and just people who like, if you didn't read like every line of the paper, they would like, pounce on you. And, it was a lot of intimidation. It's like everybody had their guard up in that sense of like, who do you know? And what are you doing? And, it was so competitive. It really turned me off to politics because I was like, I don't want to compete. I don't want to play this game. And so I was finding myself always like saying, well, in my opinion, and kind of like, again, sugarcoating it and kind of just making it nice so that I wasn't offending anyone and dealing with all these fragile egos, basically. And I think after like graduating, coming back and like working in retail, actually, I realized I had a lot of knowledge and I didn't need to like sugarcoat my opinion and I could just state it. And once I started doing that in practice, and it's not a reason to be mean or sassy or anything like that. I do think there's a point to like finding common ground and things of that nature. But I found myself doing it to excess. And I think a lot of women deal with that. Like whenever I first moved back here, I was doing a lot of voter registration, trying to get more women out to vote. And, this was years ago now. It's like come a long way. But I heard a lot from women in Oklahoma. I don't actually know enough to vote. Like, I don't feel responsible voting. And I was like, God bless you for thinking that way. Like, no, dude, I feel like very few men would be like, I don't know enough to vote. Like, they're like, my opinion matters, period. And so, like, even if they only half know about something, they'll speak on it with authority. Women are just, in my experience, especially here in the heartland, are very cautious to not offend anyone and to, that they always want to downplay what they know. And I wanted to help combat that and give them the tools to know more because they should be an informed voter. Like everyone should be really. And so I wanted to provide more easy tools that were welcoming. And that's where the News du Jour, like our podcast really comes in because it, basically is that tool package to start being informed and to not be in a space of judgment. Like I report on topics that I didn't know much about beforehand and I had to do all the research, but I kind of am here to do the legwork for the audience so that they can stay better informed with me. And yeah, so that's kind of the mission behind it.
Which is incredible. I'm just thinking too on a spiritual level, when you decided, you know what, I don't need to hedge so much, but you can do it in a nice way. Is it more that you just have love for yourself and for the person you're speaking to? And like what was the internal transformation that made it so you could just be who you are and be straightforward, but not being mean and rude? Because I have met women who overcompensate the other way and they're just really nasty and mean. And it's like, okay, like how did you figure out that balance?
For me personally, like being on the East Coast and then coming home, I just saw a lot of judgment towards people in the heartland. And I kind of could understand where they were coming from. Like you said, like that empathy piece, like I knew people here who were just ignorant, for lack of a better term. And I'm, not going to name anyone in particular, but that opened my heart up to be like, they just need a space to learn. Like they don't have that space. And to realize like, screaming at somebody doesn't ever convince them of anything. And, sort of just finding that empathy piece. And for, the people I was in the classroom with in DC, like they were afraid for themselves and they felt like they had something to prove. And just to remind yourself of where that's coming from, that energy, whether it's like the ignorance energy or the overcompensating energy, like it's coming from a place of being like scared and or not knowing. And I definitely wanted to create a more approachable, like where we could kind of check our egos at the door kind of place and just have like a safe place to learn. And that actually was like a tagline for a minute. I've had like so many over the years, but like a safe place to learn was like one of my taglines at one point, because we do with bonus episodes cover like all kinds of different topics. Like we're launching Patreon soon. And like one of the topics I told some girls at coffee yesterday, one of our bonus episodes is, are there really alligators in the New York City sewers? Like, because that's like a rumor, you know?
I'm in New York City, so good to know.
Yes, like they're real. They are real. Like when I lived in New York really briefly, I'd heard like rumors about this. I'm like, is that true? And I was so like, that's not political. That's not, about the news, but it's just interesting. And so again, I wanted to create like a safe place to learn about like all kinds of things. And we like do a deep dive into like Russia and like RBG and her life, like in case like you saw that she died, maybe know a little bit about her, but you're like, why was RBG important? Like, why am I not in the know about this? It's a safe place to come and learn about her or the alligators or the Russian stuff, and just basically feed intellectual curiosity and give you like an easy way to do it.
You are speaking to my soul right now. Everything you said, I just felt like on such a deep level. And the idea that this is a place of non-judgment. So you can come from all walks of life. You can have all kinds of knowledge or lack of knowledge. But when they come to your podcast and your website and everything that you're doing, it's just an easy way to feel like you said, you can safely learn. And I feel like that's so needed, because it's really easy to judge ourselves, to judge others. And yet it's really important to learn these things. And I know I feel hesitant because there's such a sea of information out there. And I often don't know who to trust. I don't know what to think and about certain things being said. And so I love that you offer a place where I can feel like I can learn. And so first of all, how do you read the news every day and not just like feel devastated, which I think I know the answer, but I want people listening to hear. So how do you do that? And then also, what makes it non-judgmental? Like, is it more like you take a journalistic approach, so it's more just like facts and it's quick and you just give what we need to know? Or how do you decide what?
A couple things there. First of all, to speak on the non-judgmental, because I have that answer in my head right now. I break things down to the most basic level. Like, I assume that you've never heard of this topic before. And like, sometimes maybe people are getting a little bit more backstory than they needed. But like, for example, if like I'm covering a story in like a foreign country, I try to like give some context, like what's the main industry there? Where are they located geographically? And kind of like be like, it's mostly mountains, or it's got like a beachfront in this area, but it's jungle over here. And I kind of like try to give some context, and that's just like about countries, but even like specific issues, I'll kind of like explain the backstory, assuming you don't know, because even if someone does know, it's just a little refresher. I don't go like super long because I keep the episodes to 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm not taking up crazy amounts of time. That's kind of what the bonus episodes are about, is like a little bit more time to look at a specific issue. For example, like I have one about coral reefs, and we can like go long about like what's going on with the coral reefs, because 10 to 15 minutes to get a couple stories in is actually really short. But that's what I would say makes it non-judgmental, is like, I never like assume that you know what all these things mean. And then also when it comes to me reading the news, I'm definitely affected by it. Like, I have days where I'm just like crying while I'm writing, or like, have really impassioned music listening while I'm writing, because it's just, I wanted to hit home, like whatever that feeling is. Like, I want the listener to get that through as well. But also I try to be playful when the stories are playful, and also like poking fun at Capitol Hill and like how crazy it is. Like, I like sometimes like I did this more in the beginning, and maybe I need to bring it back a little bit, but like I would sort of like liken things to Kardashian episodes or like things like that, because they're just so dramatic, like for fun sometimes. And just like, wow, we need to poke fun at this so we can like survive it. The news does affect me. How I read it is I typically actually, and I'm just full transparency type of person, I start with Yahoo. And the reason being, and my husband makes fun of me for this, but I start with it because it's not super intellectual, but it gives me a wider girth. Like, it will cover celebrity news, it'll cover sports, but it will also cover just on their homepage, like whatever is going on, whether it's political and more hard hitting, or like, international news, or if it's like, again, more like human interest stories or what have you. So I feel like I get a wide breadth there. And then I follow, New York Times, I follow Wall Street Journal, I follow Financial Times, I follow like a ton to my email inbox. So every day I'm just reading through stories, and kind of what I'll do is I'll open tabs for ones that I'm like, ooh, they should know about this. And then I'll look at them and decide what I think are the most important ones. And that is a hard decision because I'll get messages sometimes on Instagram saying like, why haven't you covered this yet? And it's one that I've like had on tabs for like days in a row, but I just felt like something else was more important in those 15 minutes for the viewer, for the listener to know about. And that's really how I try to judge it. But on the flip side, we also have slower news days where I can like report on some like animal news or like art or like something interesting like that. And I actually love digging for like those more interesting stories when it's a slower news day. So a little bit of everything.
Do you struggle with time management and feel overwhelmed by everything you have to get done? And have you tried sticking to a regular schedule but get pulled every which way by shiny objects and demands from others? If you want to simplify your life and get better at being decisive, finally getting productivity down in your life, then this message is for you. I have released a new book called How to Not Lose Your Shit, the ultimate productivity guide for entrepreneurs. This book gives all the methods that I have taught my private clients, my followers for many years on how to see results in your business and to get more peace in your life. I've had so many entrepreneurs say how overwhelmed they feel and drained and burned out. And so I teach them a framework and different techniques that help them to take back their peace and to start loving running their business again and to start feeling human again. If any of this sounds like you and any of it sounds good to you, then make sure you buy this book now. It is workbook style, so it's a roadmap, and it gives you a link as well to a download that you can easily print and use as you're implementing everything in the book. And it's very short. It's probably like 60 to 70 pages. So it's very short because I only wanted to give you information that was actually useful to you. And I throw in a few stories as well from people that I've worked with. So a lot of good things in there. Make sure you buy it now if this sounds like something you need. And if you have any questions, feel free to direct message me or email me. And I hope it helps. I'm sure that you get all kinds of opinions, all kinds of people in your inbox because the news can be a very touchy thing. How does political identification or with, how people identify so strongly with a certain party, how does that play into what you do as well? Because I'm sure there are some people who are like, oh, I'm Republican and like, maybe this all be liberal stuff, or I'm, more liberal and this is all going to be conservative stuff. So how do you make sure that people know that when they come to you, it's not like, I don't know what I'm trying to ask, but I think, yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, completely. Because I'll have people straight up comment on Instagram, like, is this a left leaning or a right leaning podcast? And just ask. And I'm like, I'm not going to answer that because I put so much effort into trying to report the facts. Like, I really do. I believe fully that as human beings, we come in with bias. Like, I think every single journalist, they see things through a certain lens, and it's impossible to fully detach from that because I've just noticed how language can be so tilted. Like, a word can basically be the same two words and then they lean it one way and someone else would lean it the other way. I read things on all sides of the aisle. I watch things on all sides of the aisle so that I feel like I'm getting a broad picture of what's going on. And I report it based, and I really try and stay fact-based. Like, this is a fact. And I've actually had a long discussion recently with a friend who was like, a fellow influencer actually, who was coming to me to discuss like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And she couldn't make up her mind. And so she wanted to talk to me about it. And she's like, well, what about this? And she would send me articles and things she was seeing online. And they were just all like blatantly biased, like to the point where it said like hashtag, one way or the other, like at the start. And I'm like, dude, it's still important to read those things to understand it, understand where both sides are coming from. That's that empathy piece, I think, again, is like you want to understand where both sides are coming from. So it's still important to read things that are biased, in my opinion. But my job as a journalist, in my opinion, is to get to the bottom of what is like the facts and report those and kind of try to leave the slant out of it in either direction as much as I can. And just number of casualties in, she eventually sent me like a graph that was like number of casualties in the conflict. And I was like, that is something that I can like tell them that is like a fact. It's checkable, like it's solid. It's not an opinion and it's not inflammatory. Also, like that was something else. Like a lot of the videos were just people like screaming and ranting and like, I can't get through that stuff. Like I needed this podcast. I needed a calmer space to consume the news. Like that's kind of our tagline for the podcast, because I try always like report in a chill way to sometimes things get emotional, but like they don't get like heated. I think that's what I'm trying to like keep out is like the screamo, because I get like 10 seconds into that and I need to turn it off. Like even like comedians and stuff are getting so heated right now online, and it's hard for me to listen to, and like especially to try to find information. And like especially if you're like a young mom or someone who's extremely busy, like you don't have time for that. You don't have the emotional like capacity to take on all of that and try and figure out for yourself what's the facts. And so we're just trying to cut through that BS and get right to the facts and give you those. And then if you're, emboldened to go do your own research and do your own deep dive and find out more, like that is exactly what we want. That's what I want, is that I want, and I said that a lot more in the beginning when we were starting out, it's like, this is like a jumping off point for our listener. Like now you have like the basics and you can dive into the stories that you are curious about and want to know more on, and you can do your own research, but now you kind of have a bird's eye view of each issue.
Which is so important. What kept coming to my heart as you were saying some of these things is there is a difference between opinion and fact. And a lot of people lately confuse the two. That just because I feel a certain way, or just because I have a certain opinion, that trumps science, that trumps facts. And I think that muddled area is getting a lot of people in trouble. And I'm so grateful for spaces like yours where it's like, okay, a fact is a fact. You can't change that. I can't change that. It is what it is. But like you said, you can choose then to dive deeper into things or to see what opinions are on it if you so choose. But at least we're like getting to know what's actual fact. And sometimes those facts aren't going to be pleasing, especially with, we talk a lot about identity on the Good Space, and how when you attach to thoughts or emotions or even just like sports teams or political parties, like it can like cloud a lot of the truth. I love that. I feel like knowing the difference between opinion and fact is so important.
Yeah. Like it's so funny you say that, because this is something I've never talked about before, but there'll be things that I come across that I don't want to be true. Like I'm like, I don't want to talk about that because that makes so-and-so look bad, or that makes, this organization look bad or something. But I'm like, nope. And I always, when I try to notice when I have that knee jerk of like, I don't want to talk about that, and fight back against that and be like, nope, this is the facts. And I need them to see the full picture, and I need to see the full picture. That's the only way that the world like becomes a better place. And that's the whole point of this podcast, is for us to know the facts and be informed in making our decisions. And so I definitely take note of that emotion when I feel like, oh, I don't want to tell them that part. That's the part that's most important for me to tell them, I feel like.
Agreed 100%. And it's almost like, or maybe it is like, truth is going to be hard in certain circumstances. The more we can be aware of that resistance or that pushback, and rather than fighting it or trying to justify it, we sit with it and allow it to be and to surrender. And that's something I'm learning in my work right now, where, I'm doing copywriting, and some of the feedback, I could take it so personal, right? When they say, oh, change this, or this is not funny enough, or this isn't relatable enough. And my natural reaction is just to like cave it within and think that I'm horrible, I'm a failure, or to think, oh, it's good, they don't know what they're talking about. But at the end of the day, if I just surrender and accept, okay, this is the feedback, now I have the choice to be better and do better and not take it personal. And then it's like my whole world opens up from there.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Like I actually love feedback. Like that's something that I like to know where my blind spots are, because like, how else can you get better? How can you improve them? Like, sometimes I would hate it if like there was something everyone in my whole life could see that I'm doing wrong, and like they're not telling me because I wouldn't be receptive. Like, that would just kill me, you know? So yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's totally like you have to check your ego. But yeah, actually I was just meeting with someone from our marketing little team who was saying, let's do like a peer review of Sugarfree Media and get like some people in a room and just who are your key demographic and see what they think. And I was like, yes, like I want that feedback. Like, I want them to tell me how they're reacting to things.
We'll have to talk about that because that sounds like something I would love to do for the Good Space.
Yeah. She's like a marketing girl here in Oklahoma, but I'm sure she could do it virtually for you as well. But I think also like when we do like a poll on Instagram, it's like our hardcore followers who will respond, of course, people who already like what we're doing, but the people you need to hear from sometimes the people who aren't speaking up. And so I'm going to be interested to see the reaction to things.
Yeah, me too. Are there any actionable steps that women can take to become more of ourselves or to become more comfortable, not sugarcoating, not hedging?
Yeah, I want to preface this with saying like I'm not perfect at this because I'm definitely not. But I would say just making a start, being like, today, in this one instance where someone is saying something, I'm just gonna nicely, not apologizing for yourself, but in a friendly tone, just today, I'm going to take this one step. I'm going to do it one time and see what happens. And like almost like an experiment, just like see what happens when you lay it out there. And I feel like honestly, it has improved my life so much because then that person knows how you feel about it. And honestly, that has improved so many things, like my communication with my husband, even like, just being able to say what's on your heart or your mind. And again, checking yourself before you go and be like, never do it with like, when you're angry or like full of emotion. I just feel like that never works out. But like kind of do it when you're calm and like you've thought it through what you want to say, and just lay it there and see what happens just one time. And then digest that. Like, you can take a break from it if you need to, and then just try and do it again and just take those baby steps because, being in Oklahoma, I've had a lot of instances where I was like uncomfortable with, just like different people's comments and things like that. And I just had to like slowly be like, you know what, I'm just going to push back a little bit and like let them know and like not make them feel like I'm judging them, and just say like, hey, like, here's how I feel about that. And I think just taking those like baby steps helps to build confidence in stating your opinion, because you realize like the world isn't going to fall apart when you do it. Like, especially if you do it with kindness and with empathy, I think you start to realize, I think this is better. Like, I think it's better that they know how I feel about this, because then we can find like a common ground. Whereas before, you were just kind of holding it all in, and that's not healthy for you. So I think ultimately just taking the first step is the hardest, but you will build confidence over time.
It's a good point. And I find that the more I let things stew, it actually subconsciously informs like things that I'm saying or doing, and even the energy around people. So it's almost like it passively will affect things anyway. So you might as well be open about it. So that way there's no confusion. Because that's one thing I love about New York City is I know where people stand. And that to me gives me the most free feeling in the world, because I don't have to question. And it actually, like, people prefer truth and for you to be direct, even if it's not something you want to share or hear. And people actually like that more than trying to cover things up or hide or divert. So
it's so true. And you'll just feel so much lighter and healthier, like getting it out there. Like, I think that, it's hard. I'm not pretending it's easy, but I still think like saying your truth, or you'll find out you were wrong because you have a discussion about it. Like, you may have been stewing on this thing thinking like, well, I disagree with this person, but not having like a productive conversation. And that's another piece of it, is just like, not everyone is going to be ready for a productive conversation about anything. Like, like there's people you cannot have a productive conversation with about things. And I think that's also important to note. But like, one of my first blog posts I wrote for like my personal blog when I started out was how to talk to someone about politics who you disagree with. And it was kind of like a roadmap of like what I've learned over time, being a more progressive person in Oklahoma. And I feel like that's just been, a challenge for me, and just kind of just what I've learned works and doesn't work, because I have people in my life who we have come to a agree to disagree kind of place. And I think it's a beautiful thing when you can kind of like at least discuss and say your piece, and no one's like hating each other at the end. I think it's really rare today. So
absolutely. Well, you are a brave soul for venturing into those conversations. I know I haven't. I've failed miserably. And sometimes you're right. It's just like, okay, we just have to not talk about certain topics together, and that's fine. So what are some books that you're reading right now?
So I'm rereading a book called Black Wall Street. It's actually about the Tulsa race massacre, the 100th anniversary. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's my dog. It's the 100th anniversary. And so I'm rereading this book, and it starts out just like a history of what Tulsa was like prior to the race massacre, and what specifically this area that was known as Black Wall Street, because it was extremely affluent in that little area. The 100th anniversary, I better read. It's kind of dry, but it's really good. And it like gets you dreaming about like what could have been if the race massacre hadn't happened, and if there had been some understanding between those communities,
Wow. That sounds like an incredible book. I'm going to definitely pick that one up. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. And where can everyone find you?
So definitely on Instagram, our handle is sugarfreemedia.co. And then on Twitter, we're sugarfree_media. On TikTok, we're Sugarfree Media, all one word. And our website is www.sugarfreemedia.co. And our podcast is News du Jour podcast. And the reason it doesn't share the name with the business is just because we hope to have more podcasts in the future. And so, we're really a media company, and we do a bunch of different types of media, but podcasting is definitely one of our biggest things that we do over at News du Jour. So definitely check that out.
We will make sure to link everything in the show notes. So if you're listening, you can hop over to whatever channel you want to go to. And again, thank you so much, Annie.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Now it's time for an affirmation. I embrace who I am and know that not everyone will agree with me. I allow myself to show up fully and say the truth with kindness. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media, and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode, or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.